Good morning. It pleases my heart, mind, and soul to witness the continuation of Hope College's Critical Issues Symposium. As your Provost, I, Dr. Gerald Griffin, aim to lead by curiosity, thinking about questions of how can we enhance the learning experience for instructors and students? What structures and personal stories should be investigated and healed to keep us on a trajectory of engaging our mission and actualizing our vision? Since 1980, that's right, 1980, 44 years ago, Hope College has set aside a day where classes aren't off, but we intentionally learn as a unified body. Today, you will find multiple opportunities to engage your disciplinary interests and skills, as well as discover intellectual topics that perhaps you didn't know you were even curious about. As a body of faculty, staff, and students, let's commit to staying curious, prioritizing our desire to understand more so than to be understood. As Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4 state, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility, consider others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look not to his own interests, but rather to the interests of others. Ask questions of others such as, why do they believe that? What life experiences led them to hold dearly to that conviction? And how might I best learn from them? And yet, even, who else could benefit from what I'm learning or have learned? These are just a few questions I hope you ask yourself during today's discussions. To start us off on this joint intellectual journey, we have the esteemed pleasure and honor to learn from and with Chloe Valdary, our 2024 Critical Issues Symposium keynote speaker. Chloe is a writer, entrepreneur, lecturer, and developer of Theory of Enchantment, which is a curriculum that provides a framework that combines social-emotional learning, character development, which students, by the way, we just had a discussion on in our faculty meeting, and interpersonal growth as tools for leadership development for education, business, government agencies, as well as many other types of organizations around the world. She has a podcast entitled The Heart Speaks. I hearken you to listen to it via Spotify. Valdary's work echoes our own virtues of public discourse. At Hope College, we aim to have the humility to listen, the hospitality to welcome, the patience to understand, the courage to challenge, and yes, the honesty to speak truth in love. Listen to how these virtues resonate with Valdary's theory of enchantment training. These trainings are based on three main principles. Treat people like human beings, not political abstractions. Criticize to uplift and empower, never to tear down or destroy. And root everything you do in love and compassion. Chloe Valdary earned a degree in her native city of New Orleans, Louisiana, at the University of New Orleans, majoring in international studies with a concentration in conflict and diplomacy. Additionally, Valdary has trained across the world, the Netherlands, South Africa, Germany, and Israel, just to name a few, pursuing a path of education around the globe, a notion that is embedded in Hope College's mission statement. Chloe has worked as a Bartley Fellow at the Wall Street Journal and has lectured at numerous educational institutions. Moreover, her work has been featured in journals such as Psychology Today and the New York Times. In an interview from LA Review of Books in 2019, Chloe described the theory of enchantment training as, you cannot really navigate the complexity of the world if you don't understand the complexity of your own self. National institutions start with individuals, and our trust or distrust in these institutions can be boiled down to perhaps our understanding of ourselves and others. I look forward to exploring with you throughout today how we respond when we do not understand, how we build upon the experiences of others, and how we all can grow in understanding, generosity, and community. People of hope, let us give a warm welcome to the 2024 Critical Issues Symposium speaker, Chloe Valdary.
Good morning, everyone. Is this on? Can you hear me? Thank you to Provost Griffin and Provost Kraus and to the whole student body at Hope College, the people of hope. I love that. That's such a beautiful phrase. I'd also love to thank the board of the Critical Issues Symposium, Ryan, Kylan, Sam, Brendan, and Ethan. Thank you so much for arranging this. I hope you will permit me a little exuberance, but I am overwhelmed with joy and must meet my joy with song. And by opening with throughout the universe displayed, then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul. I must sing. I need to sing all the day long and all of the night of the wonders made by the divine hand. And it is this feeling I have, this desire, this need of mine to sing, that I have decided to call enchantment. All day long I delight in all of creation and marvel at this 13.8 billion year old universe. And I stand in awe, gazing at you, and revel at the miniature universes every single one of you are. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul. Then sings my soul of the earth, which Scripture commands us to tend with deep reverence and care. I recently finished a beautiful book called Spell of the Sensuous by David Abram. It is really a beautiful poem concerned with this very topic of tending to the earth. In the text, Abram speaks about the land and the animal kingdom and how these have all been imbued with an intelligence that is not ours, yet is still related to ours, since all things are in relationship and all things are in a process together. And he speaks of how this intelligence of the land and of the animals, which is ours but also not ours, demands our respect. He sees an oak tree in the distance and writes, quote, "I sense that that tree is much more than what I directly see of it, since it is also what the others whom I see perceive of it. I sense that as a perceivable presence, it already existed before I came to look at it, and indeed, that it will not disappear when I turn away from it, since it remains an experience for others not just for other persons, but for other sentient organisms, for the birds that nest in its branches, and for the insects that move along its bark, and even, finally, for the sensitive cells and tissues of the oak itself, quietly drinking sunlight through its leaves, end quote. There is a Japanese word called komolebi, which literally means sunlight leaking through trees. This word describes the beauty and wonder of rays of light dappling through overhead leaves, casting dancing shadows on the forest floor. That light moves through you as well as through me. If I were to ask you who you are, what would you say? Would you answer me by giving me your name, the primary roles you play at school, at work, your relationship with your loved ones, the hobbies you enjoy? You and I are not simply one thing. We are not things at all. We are processes, effortlessly unfolding and effortlessly becoming through our relationships, in and out, in and out, in and out of time. There's a good chance, I were to guess, you did not give yourself your name. Neither did I. There's a good chance that you eat food picked by farmers you will never meet, and you break bread harvested by artisans you will never see. Komolebi. This is the light of relationship, moving through you, moving through me. This is enchantment. This too is part of the dance. It's part of the complexity of what it means to be human. And when you learn to commune with the earth, with our 4.5 billion year old home, you will learn strength, endurance, and patience. You will learn how to observe. You will learn how to pay attention. And attention is the quality of love. And this will teach you stability and resolve. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul. Then sings my soul of the water, without which there would be no life. The current scientific theory, and notice how ironic it is that I just said the word current, a term which itself means water. The water itself is baked into the contours of our language. The current theory on the origin of water is as follows, and this is taken from a really brilliant show on Netflix called Our Universe, which I highly encourage all of you to watch. Morgan Freeman does the voiceover. So this is taken from that show. He says the following: 4.5 billion years ago, when the earth was in its infancy and a fireball of molten rock, millions of kilometers out in the coldest reaches of the solar system, water crystals were forming on the surface of dust particles that clumped together and became asteroids. And these became the asteroid belt, a vast expanse of icy rocks, but they lay out of Earth's reach. But a divine miracle was stirring, and the planet Jupiter was on the move. Jupiter slowly moved towards the sun and towards a collision with that same asteroid belt, hurling icy, water-rich rocks in every direction towards the earth, bringing the promise of life one step closer. And over billions of years, asteroids became woven into the fabric of the earth as it formed. And these asteroids drove deep into the core of our planet, where they remained for millions of years, locked and waiting for another miracle to set them free. If this water had not emerged, if these rocks had stayed locked, we would not be here. There would be no life at all. These crystals remain buried beneath the vast sea of magma until slowly but surely the earth cooled and its surface hardened to a thick crust. And then the boiling interior broke through. Enormous volcanoes blasted gas and vapor kilometers into the sky. And at last, water molecules were set free. And they formed the first clouds. Clouds that grew for millions and millions of years, filling with water until the temperature dropped just enough for the very first raindrop to form and to fall. A deluge, a great flood, followed for thousands of years. And in this great and vast deluge, life began. And so I sing of water, that which flows within and without. Your blood is composed of 51% of water. Your brain and your kidneys, roughly 80% water. Your heart and your lungs, 75% water. This too is part of the dance, part of the complexity of what it means to be human. From the water we learn that the only constant is change. We learn how to be adaptable, and we learn how to go with the flow. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul. Then sings my soul of the wind, which moves according to Native American tradition in many directions. The way of the north and the way of the south, the way of the east and the way of the west, the way of above and the way of below, the way of within and the way of without, and which I could not sing without, which I could not speak without, for speech is but sounded breath. This wind, a carrier of water once it has evaporated, this breath, it moves through me, and it moves through you, and it is the very breath of the land itself that moves through trees and spreads seeds that they may harvest, and that lifts the birds along their way, that folds waves down to the seashore. This wind is the spirit of freedom, and it pushes and pulls, pushes and pulls, pushes and pulls us all forward, but I take this for granted. In my waking hours, I do not breathe deeply enough. I do not take time to notice. I do not practice breathing from the diaphragm, sending my belly outward while inhaling and contracting it in while exhaling, the way I breathed when I was first born. I do not do this enough. And I'm sure many of you relate to this. But in some moments, when I am still, I remember that the breath and the sacred holy wind are one. And so it is for you and for all of us, this gift from the divine. From the wind, from the breath, we can learn freedom and equanimity. We learn to be fully engaged with whatever arises without being caught by our own preferences, without hardening into resentment, but instead remembering that the wind is inside of us and remembering to deeply and with reverence breathe. This too is part of the dance, is part of the complexity, the beauty, the awe of what it means to be human. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul. Then sings my soul of the fire of our beloved sun, our beloved star, to quote Lord of the Rings. That giant fusion reactor turning hydrogen into helium at its core and releasing energy in the form of light and heat, gifting us the sensations and the metaphors of shadow and light, cold and hot, warming us in winter and delighting us in summer. We kindle the fire of electricity to light our cities and our homes. And when the fire is kindled inside us, we can feel a myriad of feelings, from willpower here in the solar plexus, like anger. We say we feel heated when we are enraged, as energy combusts inside of us, sending signals that our needs have not been met, or that our value system has been dishonored, beckoning us this heat to act accordingly to ensure it be honored again. Of course, too often we respond to that fire inside with more fire outside, with more firepower outside, because we have not been trained to channel our fire with intention and direction and to temper it with the other elements. Dr. King wrote about this. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of our great sages, wrote about this in Letter from a Birmingham Jail when he was asked why he was protesting at all. He said that the people are angry and that anger can be channeled productively or destructively. And it is my job, and I'm adding this part, but it is my job as a firebender, as a fire channeler, to help the people channel their anger productively and constructively so that it moves in a way that is ultimately healing without burning down the forest. On the other hand, we also feel fire, a warm and fuzzy fire inside of us when we know and feel that we are loved. So fire has a dual nature, signaling, depending on the time and the circumstance, rage or fellowship, bitterness or communion, hatred or love. This too is part of the dance, part of the complexity of what it means to be you, of what it means to be human. From the fire, we learn to wield power, and that we can do so constructively or destructively. So sings my soul, sings my soul. So sings my soul, sings my soul. When I remember that the divine hand, which conjured the fire, the wind, the water, and the earth into being, also brought me into being, I know then and there that I am the very frequency of love itself. No matter who I am, no matter what race or color or creed, no matter my childhood or external circumstances I have faced in my life, no matter if I am experiencing good days or bad days, I am the very frequency of love itself. And so too are you. Yet all of this is easy to forget. It is easy to forget when your phone buzzes. It is easy to forget because the baby needs to be fed, and the bills need to be paid, and the groceries need to be put away. It is easy to forget that life itself is a prayer. It's too easy because some days I feel small and self-absorbed and self-conscious and worried about my looks or my mannerisms or whether or not people are judging me, for I am constantly, it seems, judging myself. It is an old hang-up I picked up, I'm sure, from episodes of being bullied as a child. It's too easy for me to forget my singing and instead look around me or look at my phone and see homelessness or read about police brutality on the streets of New York, the city I live in. It's easy for me to forget my singing when I hear from my Jewish friend that her cousins were slaughtered on 10/7 in Israel. And I hear from my Palestinian friend that his sister was cut down by bombs dropped on Gaza. And war in the Middle East drones on, and politicians remain at each other's throats. And attempted assassinations of Donald Trump fill my news feed. And social media continues to make me angry all the time and profits from my anger. When I forget to sing, I am consumed and I become reduced to the role of the consumer. And I see enemies everywhere. And I become paranoid and make assumptions about the lived experiences of my enemies. And I do not love them as I should, as I desire to. And I do not remember that the fire, the water, the earth, and the air moves through them, even as it moves through me. So I created the theory of enchantment to help me to remember. Dr. Maya Angelou said that the bigot and the brute and the batterer are all children of God, whether they know it or not, and I'm supposed to treat them accordingly. This is a hard teaching. It does not mean turning a blind eye when seeing bigotry or when seeing someone inflict suffering on another, but rather recognizing that the bigot suffers too. And this is indeed why she inflicts suffering on another. She does not know what to do with her pain. Indeed, is too ashamed to admit that she feels pain in the first place, for that would mean that she is human and not the superior power she has made herself out to be, but human with flesh and blood and sinew and bone, here today and gone tomorrow, just like the wind, just like the water. This insecurity is much too much to bear at times, and so she must scapegoat and project it outward onto them out there, onto the other, onto the amorphous mystery of being, which she only sees in the other, but has not yet learned to greet with reverence in herself. She is not yet in touch with that great mystery which resides inside her own soul, And so she overcompensates by projecting her fear of the unknown outward. And of course, she finds others who do the same. And in finding those others who mirror her, who share her pain and her anxieties, her anger and her grief, she feels fellowship and belonging for maybe the first time in her adult life. When her fears are reflected and echoed by others, maybe in person, this is her closest of family, her most palpable experience of feeling seen in a long time. So she and her new family of frightened, lonely, heartbroken brothers and sisters take their pain together, collectively, and project it outward, utterly unconscious of what they do and what their impact is on themselves and on others. And though they may be privileged, in power, and have access to all kinds of material means and resources, we know that man does not live by bread alone. And the suffering that these people inflict pales in comparison to the suffering they have been made to endure. Indeed, to discharge my pain on another without being conscious of what I do, without mourning and without great sorrow, well, this is a kind of suffering that I would wish on no man, not even my greatest enemy. James Baldwin spoke about this in 1965 in a debate with William F. Buckley. He spoke about how the racist sheriff in the South, with his guns and his power, suffers. He said the following: "Now I suggest that of all the terrible things that can happen to a human being, this is one of the worst. I suggest that what has happened to white Southerners is in some ways, after all, much worse than what has happened to Negroes there. Because Sheriff Clark in Selma, Alabama, cannot be considered, no one can be dismissed as a total monster. I'm sure he loves his wife, his children. I'm sure he likes to get drunk. After all, one's got to assume he is visibly a man like me. But he doesn't know what drives him to use the club, to menace with the gun, and to use the cattle prod. Something awful must have happened to a human being to be able to put a cattle prod against a woman's breasts, for example. What happens to the woman is ghastly. What happens to the man who does it is in some ways much, much worse." That's James Baldwin writing in 1965 at the height of Jim Crow. And so I say to you that in order to respond to this phenomenon, which you yourselves, which indeed all of us, are liable to fall prey to, you must return your attention to your own mortal frame on a daily basis, and you must treat yourselves and each other like human beings, not political abstractions. You must criticize to uplift and empower each other, never to tear down or destroy. And you must root everything you do in love and compassion. These are the three principles of the theory of enchantment, so I will repeat them. Treat each other like human beings, not political abstractions. Criticize to uplift and empower. never to tear down or destroy, and root everything you do in love and compassion. What does it mean to be a human being? Well, you might say, well, obviously I'm not a tree or a rock. I know what it's like to be a human being, Chloe. Well, let us explore that. As a being, you are durable and strong like the earth of which your flesh is made. You are constantly changing and transforming like the water which flows through your veins, and, as I said earlier, which makes up 60% of your blood and 75% of your brain. You are not an object. You are not a fixed thing. You have feelings and emotions that come and go like the wind. And all of these feelings, be they joy or sadness, anger or disgust, you must learn to relate to them consciously without denying them or repressing them. For if you deny or repress your feelings, they will return like a vengeance, and you will compulsively act them out. And this cycle will repeat itself interpersonally, in families, in governments, between nations, as it does to this day. And truth be told, it may repeat itself in some way until the end of time, for this too is the nature of all things. And yet, if enough of us begin to remember and practice remembering daily that we are the very frequency of love itself, that the divine hand which made the shadow and the light also made you, that your unique body and form is itself evidence of God's creativity. And when you remember this about your neighbor and you act accordingly, there will be less unnecessary suffering and less unnecessary pain in the world. And it is not that there will be less heartbreak, but rather that you will learn that instead of letting your heart break down, you can let it break open into the doorway of compassion. How much love can you hold? How much love can you bear? This is the only task I set before you. What does it mean to be a human being? You have needs like food and water and human connection, and when those needs are not met, things start to happen. Things start to break down. When those needs are met, you thrive. But when they're not met, you feel insecure. And that's okay. We all feel insecure at times. I feel insecure at times. It's part of what it means to be alive, but if you don't know what to do with that insecurity, you will contract and hold on to life with a rigidity born of fear, and you will project that fear outwards onto others to discharge your pain. Your limbic system will go into fight or flight or freeze in the face of insecurity, and anything that looks unfamiliar to you, you'll see as a threat. And you'll say to yourself, all the people who look like me are good, and all the people who don't look like me are bad. Or all the people who think like me are good, and all the people who don't are bad. Or all the people who share my social status or economic status or outlook on life are good, and all the people who don't are bad. You will reach for this as a coping mechanism. You will do this in order to protect yourself, to defend yourself, to armor yourself, until you remember, by God, I hope you remember that you are the very frequency of love itself, and you have the gumption to rise to that frequency, and all of your actions come from that frequency. And in doing so, all of your actions become an act of prayer. This is the task I set before you. And there's nothing dramatic about this. You chop wood and you carry water, and this becomes an act of prayer. You say good morning to the bus driver, and this becomes an act of prayer. You buy groceries, and this becomes an act of prayer. You go to class, you debate your friends, you write on social media, you protest, you build community, you laugh, you mourn, you dance, and this becomes an act of prayer. And this is what is meant by enchantment. Criticize to uplift and empower, never to tear down or destroy. This is the second principle of the theory of enchantment. Why? Because if you tell someone over and over again they are nothing, if you tell someone they are less than nothing, that they count for nothing, they will say to you, "Oh, you think I am nothing? I will show you what nothing looks like." And they will become even worse than what you have accused them of being. And the moral of the story is that a person cannot develop character unless they are valued. A person cannot develop character unless they are valued. Consider the story of Arno Michaelis, former white nationalist who hated people of color. He fell into the white nationalist movement as a young preteen. He was born into an alcoholic family. His parents struggled from alcohol addiction and so could not give him the tools that he needed to thrive as a human being. So he became angry and filled with rage. And white power skinhead music reflected that anger back at him, reflected that frequency back at him, and met him where he was. And so he spiraled further down into the vortex of that hatred because he found people who were able to see him in that anger, but unlike Dr. King, channeled that anger into a very destructive outlet. Hatred, James Baldwin says, is a coping mechanism for pain. James Baldwin observed that the reason why we cling to our hatreds so tightly, so profoundly, is that we do not know how to deal with pain. Arno did not know how to deal with pain. And so he reached for hatred as a coping mechanism. But of course, this did not work to actually heal the pain. Like all numbing mechanisms, it numbed for a short time. But he needed to find other outlets to heal the pain. So he himself fell into alcohol addiction. He himself got into street fights. He tried also to commit self-harm, all to try and numb the pain. And this continued until other people decided to meet his hatred with love, decided to raise the frequency of that hatred by modeling love, and who refused to respond to his hatred with further hatred. This caused cognitive dissonance in him. What he saw and what he thought were not aligned. This eventually led to a feeling of too much exhaustion from that hatred. And eventually he left the white power skinhead ideology and today works to bring people out of those movements, out of those ideologies, understanding the relationship between insecurity and hatred as a way to cope. This brings me to the third and final principle of the theory of enchantment. Root everything you do in love and compassion. This third principle is the culmination of the first two, and it simply means become love. Embody that which you already are. Reject any doctrine or dogma that seeks to turn you or any other into an object, into a fixed thing. As I said earlier, you are not a thing. You are a living, breathing process, a universe in miniature, a cosmos all unto yourself, constantly becoming the very chant in enchantment. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul. I will end with a poem written by the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The name of this poem is called Please Call Me by My True Names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second, I am arriving. To be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am a mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant, selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am also the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up and the door of my heart could be left open, the door of compassion. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul, then sings my soul. Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes for questions. If any students want to lead us off with any questions that you might have for our speaker. And you can come to the front. There's a microphone here. Or any others that might have questions.
It's also okay if you don't. I said a lot.
Well, I would just say thank you again, Chloe, and thanks everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next set of events.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking with us, by the way. I really appreciate what you had to say and the perspective that you offered. I'm just curious, can you tell a little bit about sort of where you developed this theory, or maybe the why behind, what you kind of established in the three different components?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about, the evolution of theory of enchantment. Thank you for your question. So I created theory of enchantment about 5 years ago, and my major was international studies with a concentration in conflict and diplomacy. And I studied Middle Eastern conflict, and I received a really beautiful education, but I was struck by the fact that there was an absence of love explicitly, or the use of love, or the question of love in overcoming conflict, or mitigating really painful conflict. And so I really wanted to build something that focused on love as a framework. And so I moved from New Orleans to New York and developed this framework while I was at the Wall Street Journal. And I asked myself the question, well, if I want to learn how to love, maybe I should see what are we as a species already in love with, and work backwards from there. And the answer that came to me was pop culture. So I actually started to study Disney and Beyonce and Nike and Apple and other brands that had a lot of, quite frankly, religious-like devotion from the species, to see if there were common themes, common denominators across these brands, to see what was the reason why we were so moved by the stories that Disney told and the songs that Beyonce sang. And I found the common theme was that in each of these brands, we could see ourselves and our potential reflected back at us. So almost every good Disney movie is a motif for the human condition. It's some flawed, imperfect human being encountering and going through a series of obstacles, overcoming a series of obstacles, and becoming the hero or the heroine as a result. And I was sort of taking in, metabolizing all of these brands that I was studying, and I was reading a book at the time called Enchantment by Guy Kawasaki, the former marketing director of Apple. And he talked about how Steve Jobs used enchantment as this kind of design principle to design Apple products. And I found, that was obviously present in Disney as well. When we think of Disney, we think of enchantment. And so that sort of word really seemed to capture what it was I was trying to get at, this process by which we open up, by which we are delighted by ourselves and each other, and able to be vulnerable and transparent and kind towards each other. I'll also add that enchantment is not enlightenment. There is a difference in my mind between the two. When I think of enlightenment, I think of almost like blinding light coming down, and that was certainly the imagery that was used in the Enlightenment period. But enchantment is actually about holding your light and your shadow in balance. It's more of a yin-yang sort of approach to the human condition. It's not this attempt to completely get rid of or reject your what Carl Jung would call the shadow, but rather to hold it in balance with your light and to understand that all of these things make up the complexity of what it means to be you. And in fact, light cannot exist without darkness. There is no darkness without light. There's no light without darkness. If you look everywhere in this room where you see shadow, you see light. It's built into the very fabric of reality itself. And so enchantment poses the notion that if we are able to hold gracefully the complexity of our shadow and our light, we'll be able to extend that compassion to others as well. Thank you for your question. Yes. Sure. Yeah. When I first created it, it wasn't intentional in the sense that it wasn't conscious. So the question, to repeat, is about this idea that within enchantment there's this childlike wonder. There's this sense of childlike wonder. And did I create or use the word enchantment knowing that or intentionally? I would say subconsciously I did, but I didn't intentionally in a conscious way do that. But I will say that I've always wanted to be in a state of play at all times. I love to sing, I love to dance, I love to play. And I'm from New Orleans. New Orleans is the birthplace of jazz, and jazz is play. And the idea of being a jazz musician is really embodying this orientation of play as a life philosophy, as a lifestyle. So that speaks to me, and of course, it matches, it aligns with also a childlike exuberance. So it wasn't conscious, but I think subconsciously it was there.
I'll say thanks again, Chloe, and thanks everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
day.